You're listening to Toronto's #1 real estate podcast, powered by Watson Estates. The most successful local real estate investing starts right here, right now. Here's your host, broker, investor, and social media influencer, Bradley Watson.
Hey investors, Bradley here from Watson Estates. Thank you for tuning in. This is the #1 podcast for Toronto real estate on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. And today we have an outstanding guest. His name is Patrick Francie. Listen to this. He is a speaker, facilitator, and host over the last 2 decades. He has taught and presented to thousands of real estate investors, entrepreneurs across Canada, both live and online. He is best known for providing his audience with foundational lessons and context for understanding how to, quote, treat your real estate investing like a business. And it shines through in our interview today. His claim to fame these days is the CEO and managing partner of the Real Estate Investment Network. No small organization. They are the leading source for real estate investing education since 1992. And their members have invested and transacted in almost 40,000 properties worth over $5 billion. He's also the host of the hit The Everyday Millionaire podcast, which he launched in early 2017, which I encourage you guys to check out. This guy has all the credentials, and the conversation we have today is amazing. We actually are talking about what the market is going to do, what are some of the opportunities that they are presenting at REIN for their membership, and where are some of the opportunities and maybe concerns that have come out of COVID-19. I hope you guys love this podcast as much as I enjoyed making it. Enjoy. Hi, Patrick. Thank you for joining us. I know you're a really busy guy running the show over there at the Real Estate Investment Network, so thank you for tuning in. And I'm sure our audience has heard about you. They've heard about what you guys do. You're putting out amazing content in a time when people really need it. Maybe if you can tell us a little bit more about your organization, why not hear it from the CEO himself?
Thanks for the opportunity. Happy to be on the show. For REIN's we've been around 28 years, so actually 29 years. And, depending on where you enter the conversation with us, you'll know us as an education company, or you'll know us as a research company. You'll know us as a combination of both. Ultimately what we are is we're a national organization that has, really set ourselves up to be the leader in the space called real estate investment education and research, and supporting real estate investors in achieving those goals, that financial certainty and assuring their financial future using real estate investing. So we don't sell real estate. So we're really the only organization that is a pure education and research company. We don't sell real estate. So that leaves our research very biased, or unbiased, I should say, because we don't have skin in the game in any given city. We're not trying to say, well, this is a really great city because, well, we just happen to have a deal here. So it's just a way for us to, remain unbiased with our research, and that's what we do. And so we're a national organization. We're community-based, membership-based. We have many members that have been around 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, 15 years, and longer. And that's because when you get into that community and you're part of that culture, so community of like-minded people that are investing in real estate, within the culture that we've created, it's very collaborative. It's not like people are holding their secrets and not telling people. It's collaborative. People care about the success of the others in the community. And then that's really putting people into an environment where they can succeed. And so, some time ago, I coined the phrase that real estate doesn't fail us, we fail real estate. And we fail real estate because we don't look at the economic fundamentals, and then we don't put ourselves in the right environment. We've shifted a lot, we pivoted a lot. If that's a good word these days, is we've pivoted, given what's going on with COVID. And we're pushing out a lot more content. We're doing a lot more research. We are going to be, and we are the leaders in this space. And we realize that investors now more than ever need information. They need content.
Yeah, and none of that is understated. You guys are putting out a phenomenal amount of content, and our listeners have enjoyed. We've reaped the benefits of that. And I would encourage anyone who's maybe heard of REIN to check out a little bit more. I know you guys do a ton of stuff in outreaching and to sharing information. You guys are very free with your information, and you serve a group that desperately needs relationships in investors, right? There is definitely a relational business. And if you're going to grow any substantial portfolio, you need it. So good on you. And I think what we're hoping to get out of the podcast today is to learn a little bit about the market in the eyes of REIN. I mean, and I know we could talk for hours, but
Yeah,
I think we're looking a little bit for more Cole's notes on what is your organization's stance on the current market and kind of where we go from here.
Well, I don't think we take a stance per se. I don't know if that's not how we look at it. I want to state again a little bit to give it context. When we look at real estate, and when you look at real estate investing from a perspective of what are the economic fundamentals that drive real estate. So as real estate investors, we want to look into the future. We want to look at where real estate's going, not where it's been, right? Like that's too late. We want to know where it's going. We're going to look at some historical data, but we want to look into the information of where it's going. So we look at GDP growth. We look at population growth. We look at immigration numbers. We look at employment numbers. And we really look at what drives a real estate market, and GDP is at the top of that list of things. So when we look at the what we call the real estate investment success cycle, we have to look at all the components of the economic fundamentals that drive a region. If you don't, you're actually just speculating, right? You're making some assumptions. And when you speculate, that's when it comes back to kind of go the wrong way. So where are we today? That's all to say, where are we today? What are we looking at? And if we're depending on where you're investing, because real estate's so regional, like I can't stress that enough. It's why when we see a headline, talking about, Canada's average price or average rents or average wage, it's like, it drives us it's a little bit of a button for us, right? Because that's like saying, what's the average temperature in Canada? Well, okay, what city are you in? What day is it, right? And that's really what it is with real estate. We have to look very regionally and look at the cities, look at the areas and say, what's happening there? What's happening in Toronto? What's happening in Peterborough? What's happening in Hamilton? Or really Barrie? Like we look at each area and then break it down to say what's driving that. And there's a lot of factors that drive that.
Maybe you could share some of those factors. I'm interested. You got me sold. What are some of the big things you're watching right now?
So we look at what's happening globally, the macro. Then we look at what's happening provincially. And then we break it down into say, well, what's happening municipally? And then we can break it down and see what's happening in neighborhoods. So if we're investing in real estate, truly investing in real estate, we have to say, why are we buying this property? Why are we considering this project? And what is our exit strategy? What's the outcome that we're trying to achieve? Appreciation. Now, some people are doing that. They're going to try and ride the wave of appreciation. Great. It's a great strategy if you understand what you're doing. You may be do a buy and hold strategy where you really want to be able to look at a long term and say, where's this market going in the long term? Where are rents going in the long term? Perhaps you're doing a fix and flip. Well, okay, so if you're doing a fix and flip, an income strategy, that's different than a buy and hold. So then you have to say, well, in this market right now, does fix and flip make sense? Can I cash flow on a buy and hold deal? Do I really see appreciation in 2, 3, 5 years from now or in 6 months from now because that's why I'm buying it. So the mistake that real estate investors make is that the economic fundamentals are what they are. Then you have to decide from there, what is the strategy that you're going to use within the economic conditions? There's no bad place to invest in real estate. And I say that, in general. What there is a shift of strategies that you have to use based on what's happening. So you might not do a rent to own in a specific area or a fix and flip. If you're going to do a fix and flip, you better have 2 or 3 or 4 exit strategies because you may be selling into a market that just all of a sudden fell off. A black swan, maybe a COVID, right? And so you could run into a problem. You better be prepared for those things. So the economic fundamentals that you always come back to, and there's, my research team probably, who's led by Jennifer Hunt, my VP of research, but our research team has done a brilliant job. But they look at, I want to say 80 data points. We talk about 8, which is the kind of the foundational, which is GDP growth. So the reason that's important is because GDP growth drives employment. Now, when you've got great employment, what happens? Well, people want to move into that region because they want a job. So they move into that region And if they're from outside of, whether it be interprovincial or immigration, what we know is that people moving into a city that haven't lived there in the past will generally rent 2 to 3 years. Interprovincial is a little quicker, but immigration is, historically data supports a 3-year time frame, 2-3-year time frame. Why is that? And why do we need to know that? Well, if we're investing in that particular city, whatever it is, by the way, based on that, we want to know that what are they going to do? Where are they going to live? Well, they want to rent for that 2 or 3 years. And they're going to rent. Why? Because they don't have a track record with the bank. They don't have a track record with the job. If they're immigration, culturally, we see, and I'm sure listeners have experienced that culturally, we move to the areas where we want to hang out with our peeps, right? Like we want to go where our cultures live. And that's why there's Chinatowns and Little Italies and all of the things that there are. And so it takes a while to establish that when you immigrate from another country. So then you start to look, and then eventually you buy a home. So those are the things that happen. As investors, if you're into a buy and hold strategy where you're going to buy and rent out, you need to know that. You need to understand what the jobs are in that area. Why are people moving into the area? And what kind of income are they making? Are these high-paying jobs? Are these tech jobs? Are they engineering jobs? What is driving that employment? Is it sustainable? And we see in different cities, of course, where in Ontario, of course, manufacturing cars, all those things, we see some of the highs and lows of the cycles, where GM will shut down the plant or Ford will pause or whatever happens, and then people get laid off, and then bam, right? So we look at what's driving those jobs. Very, very important. And supply and demand.
So here's what I'm hearing. GDP leads to employment, employment leads to immigration, and that leads to the stability of supply and demand.
It does, because it creates demand, doesn't it? When you have economic conditions where, a city, a region is kind of chugging away, you have consumer confidence, right? And when consumers start to buy, when they get things churning, of course, that's where we start to see good economic conditions. When people are buying things, people are working, they're buying things, the businesses are making money, they're hiring staff. And as rental housing providers, that's the term that we prefer to use, not landlords, because it's a negative connotation these days to be a landlord. We're happier to be a rental housing provider. We are actually looking at saying, well, affordable housing is in fact an issue. Being a rental housing provider and looking after clients, not tenants, is another aspect of how you play the game called investing in real estate. And it leads to a far more successful experience when you do it that way.
So you're a nicer guy than I am, because I like to try and get cut between the bone a little bit. So you mentioned these ideas of strategies, right? And I know even in the reports that have been released from you guys, there's been kind of pointing in certain directions. So maybe if you could elaborate on what are some of the better strategies, maybe where there are opportunities. And actually what I'm also interested in personally is what markets have you most excited in the GTA, if any? Well,
when we released the top town report in February, you look at, it's hard not to be excited about Ottawa. Okay. But let's use Ottawa as an example. That's kind of number one on our list. Well, why is it number one? It's number one because guess what is happening there? It's still got the highest employment rate. Now, why is that?
Yeah.
Government town. I'm not going to get into politics about this, but ultimately we know that the feds have cleaned up through attrition and all the things. So they run a pretty tight ship according to the feds. Well, that drives a lot, plus tech, plus the transportation changes that Ottawa's made has opened up a whole different world. Yep. So they got a great job.
Already doing good. So this stability helps them huge.
Yeah, it helps them huge. So yes, we're excited about Ottawa. We look at Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo. We look at Hamilton, Barrie, Durham Region, Brampton. We go down our top town list, and each of those areas, it has got its own place in the what we call the real estate cycle. We have to consider what happens, the influencers, right? Mortgage rate hikes, mortgage rate drops, refinancing is easy, financing is hard. Like those are all influencers in a market, usually short-term blips, but there's no saying how long an influencer that happens, a black swan event, an economic recession, a COVID crisis, all of those things affect those cycles. But when we look, Toronto GTA, then we say all good cities. Toronto's in that area, but then what do you use for a strategy in Toronto? What is the pretty tough to buy a cash flow property in Toronto? Not impossible, but difficult to do to get real true cash flow because of the prices, right? So then you ask yourself, I want to invest in Toronto. Okay, great, beautiful. Why do you want to invest in Toronto? What is it about Toronto that supports your goal? When we look at real estate, we talk about it all the time. It secures a financial future. It can generate income today, what we call active income, or it's going to support you with future income. And how I invest in Toronto is going to be different than how I invest in Barrie, how I invest in Hamilton, perhaps. And we have to look at, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to state the obvious, but what is my job? My job's to put my money to work. What's the most effective, impactful way for me to put my money to work? I may look at Toronto and go, that's awesome, but what's the strategy I have to use in there? And does that fit with what I'm trying to achieve? And if it does, then I'm going to park cash in Toronto. And if it doesn't, I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to change my strategy. I'm going to look at an area and say, I'm going to get into an up-down bungalow. I'm going to do that in Hamilton, Barrie. I'm going to do that in Peterborough, right? Because I look at the economic fundamentals and I say, how do I want to put my money to work? What's my time frame? And then I start to make decisions from that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I guess that's the difference really between investor thinking and buying, right? If you got a job and you got to live there and you got to be close to commuting, that's one approach. You're looking for yourself. But as an investor, the options are huge, right? Like at the end of the day, as long as you're generating, whether that's cash flow or equity, I get what you're saying. And this is awesome. So not everybody is in a situation where they're fortunate enough to invest right now. Maybe some people are considering when is a good time. What does that look like? So whether you want to get into whatever the details are for COVID, what are some suggestions you would make, given everything going on today, to someone considering maybe investing in the real estate market?
That's such a great question, Brad, and it's an important question. And I'll tell you why. The headlines are messed up. You can't get a straight answer from, bankers, from the government, from economists. And the reason, and listen, I talk to economists on a regular basis, and I do a lot of research. My team does a lot of research, and we're looking at how confusing it can be for people who are just saying, well, should I invest in real estate? Is this an opportunity? So there's a couple of camps, right? RAIN, of course, is, over the years is like 150,000 investors, members that have been through that have done the work we've worked with. We got thousands across Canada now, and many of them are very accomplished. Okay, many. They have multiple doors. They've done a lot of stuff, and they're still actively investing. But they're playing a different game. Number one, they know why. They know where it fits in the bigger picture. So they're actually actively buying today. And then there's those who are just starting out on the journey, and they're going, what do I buy? Where do I buy? How do I buy? Like lots of questions. And, in that case, anybody who's starting to consider investing in real estate, we know that COVID's going to create some opportunities. 100% there's going to be opportunities. We just don't quite know exactly when and what they're going to be, but it's coming, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So for anybody starting out right now, this is the time to, what we say, sharpen your saw. So we do lots of free events, wire events, what we call winning in real estate events. And it's really to talk to newer investors who are going, should I, shouldn't I? Is real estate a thing for me? Can I pull this off? Okay, so now, if you're just getting started, is it time to sharpen your saw? It's really the time to sit on the sidelines, but not jump in the game, but it's really time to prepare. Because as we see the future of real estate in different regions, there's going to be some great buying opportunities. So you want the education now. What we do, a term we call, the term we use is what's behind the curtain. Because everybody's reading headlines. They're all headline readers, and that's what the masses do. And we say, well, okay, but what's behind the curtain? 9 to 18% decrease in property values. Well, number one, it's like that was the Canada-wide statement, which just pushes my buttons. But anyways, that's fine. And literally, Canadian Real Estate Association, realtors are going, what the hell are you doing? That's irresponsible. You can't freak the markets out like that. Now, if you're in the game, you understand the dynamics of the two, okay? CMHC, credible, CREA, credible. But if you're the masses, if you're a new real estate investor, or even perhaps an experienced real estate investor, you're going, well, now what the hell? Who do I believe? I got realtors who are in the trenches going, That's bullshit. But I got CMHC going, be careful because we can expect a 9 to 18% drop. And by the way, we're even going to make it harder for you to finance your properties because we're freaking out too. Like, that's not what they said, but that's what they said because of the changes they made. Yeah, right. So if you're in the world called, I don't even know what research to do, that's where Rain comes in and says, okay, that's why we teach this. It's enough that you guys get to benefit from our reports, love it. But we like to teach people to fish, to actually have an intelligent conversation about why you're investing in real estate and why we want to be investing in real estate. And that's the game that we play, right? So where are we at with COVID? We talked to economists. We've had economists on our stage. And Ben Meyer, he was one of our keynotes at an event we did. Gary Morris, a keynote. Sherry Cooper's coming. Will be on my podcast, Everyday Millionaire, as well as Carl Gomez, both very, very accomplished economists. And we talk about it. But here's the thing to consider. They're all hedging. Now, I shouldn't say that. Carl isn't because he's no longer with an organization. What people don't understand about economists like Benjamin Tall, who guy's so credible, such a good guy. Benjamin Tall, I have all the respect in the world, so I want to be careful about that. I preface that because Sherry Cooper the same way. The only thing about it is that they're having to be cautious. Why? They're representing the organization they work with. And they have to be responsible, very responsible with what they say because they don't want to freak the masses out. They got a lot of people listening to them. So if they come across with run, it's going to be like, no, we can't do it. That can really screw up a market. They've got a voice. And so as an investor myself, of course, and as the organization that is unbiased, and all we want to do is put on the table for real estate investors what they need to know, I'm not as attached to that. I want people to have some insights to make a decision for themselves. So when we look at COVID, Benjamin Tall comes out and he says, well, right now the market's frozen. That's I think the term that he uses. It's kind of suspended. I look at it, there's two analogies I use, Brad. One of which is when you're on a trampoline, there's that moment in time when you go in and you're suspended. It's weightless, right? You're stopped. That's split second, okay? But then what happens? Okay, gravity has a way of pulling you down. It's the magic of gravity, right? So that's one analogy. And I go, okay, well, if we're a suspended economy, what does that really mean? And then the other one was that I got to that I see is, and we've heard phrases like there's a tsunami, there's been an earthquake, tsunami's rolling in. We think the tsunami's hit, and the tsunami hasn't hit. It's still out there and it's rolling in, okay? So that's another analogy, depending on how you hear this. I look at it as an economic seizure, right? Like we seized. Now, if you're familiar with a seizure or seen somebody have a seizure, it slams you and then you kind of come out of it and you're dazed. So these are all
what you're saying is that gravity is going to hit us. We're going to get hit by a tsunami and we're having a seizure.
All of that. So those are all, metaphors for the fact. Those are all metaphors for it. And so don't hear it as this doom and gloom because it's not at all that. These are all things that it really is the context for investors, which is to exercise caution, to look at the economic fundamentals. And right now we don't have the data. We just don't. Gosh, not everybody's back to work. Still CERB is being handed out, and that was extended for another 8 weeks. Restaurant, retail, kind of the service industry that aren't fully back to work. That's where most of the unemployment lives, but we don't know what that number is. So when things start to roll back and everybody gets back to work again, is the employment going to be 10%, 8%, 14%? We actually don't know. And who's not in that number is all the self-employed individuals, the small business owners, the restaurant owners that will never go back to work. They'll never have their business again. Now, that can sound really negative, but the reality of it is that as Canadian, as entrepreneurs, we're very, very innovative. So it will fire up again. You may lose that restaurant, but there'll be somebody else that comes up with another restaurant that works within the context called these are the rules of COVID. So I don't want to paint a picture of doom and gloom. I'm not looking at it that way at all, by the way. What I'm saying is that there's a lag time between what's happening and what has happened and the result of that. Now, this is all kind of a long-winded conversation, Brad, but these are all of the things we look at as real estate investors. Because, right now what's happening is, at a time of the highest unemployment right now is a labor shortage. And why is that? Well, if you're getting a couple grand a month and that's as much or maybe even a little more than you made working, I don't know if I want to go back to work, right? That's what's happening. And that's happening consistently across the country.
So what I love about this conversation is, for the listeners that tune into our podcast, this is not new. There's some really good stuff in here, but this is it's actually very enlightening to hear someone that's in a position like yours and a company like yours with very similar views and is tracking the same stuff we are. And I think that's cool. And I think for people who are just trying to get their feet wet, they're trying to figure out, maybe they want to learn. I think there's going to be a lot of listeners that have listened to this podcast that realize if they like what I'm doing here, they're going to love what you guys are doing there. So what would be an avenue for them to get involved with REIN, and how could they learn a little bit more?
Well, certainly going to, we do blogs. I do my podcast, The Everyday Millionaire, which you can listen in on theeverydaymillionaire.ca. And I've got lots of guests on there, but I got some economists upcoming on it. We do blogs. We do, lots of social media stuff. If you go to our website, reincanada.com, look at our events, look at what we have going on, then there's lots of information there to learn more about us. And I want to say one thing off that comment that you made just now, Brad, which is the fact that you guys do what you do, that this conversation is familiar with you. If there's guidance I'm going to give you, we talk about being a resource and a source for all things real estate investor. But what you just said is such an important part, and that is to align yourself with an investor-focused realtor, to align yourself with a realtor who is an investor themselves, understand the economic fundamentals that can actually give you guidance. If there's a mistake that I see new investors make, it's that they get into the game with a brother-in-law who's a great realtor, but he sells homes. And it's so important that you align yourself with a team, a realtor being one of them, a mortgage broker being another, just as an example, that are actually investor focused.
Thank you so much. This has been an awesome conversation. Everything you're adding is just so much value to our listeners. And I hope we can maybe do this again in the future. And I'm going to keep my eye on what REIN is doing. And I really appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy, so thank you for joining us.
Yeah, appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation. We can go a long time on economic fundamentals, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a great one.
Thanks, Brett.